welcome friends. Matt Monaco and I decided to wrest control of the Stocks to Trade YouTube channel from Tim Bohen, with his permission, of course, for a couple of videos. Matt, you've been working on something totally brand new and super cool.
Yeah, so I've been working in the background with a market insider on what we're calling money glitches, which is just mysterious anomalies in the market where essentially insiders are pulling the strings and manipulating those trades. That's been the main focus of mine over the last several months, learning, really fine-tuning that strategy to go out there and continue my trading journey.
So, I mean, I'm kind of familiar with what you've been working on, and one of the reasons I wanted to sit down and have this conversation with you for everybody is that the whole system and strategy, it goes back to you growing your account from your dorm room. Mm-hmm. And I have repeated this story on webinars 1,000 times, but I've never actually gotten to sit down with you and ask this. So we're going to come back around to the glitches.
Okay.
But I want to talk about this dorm room stuff. I want to talk about this trading. So you're a student at the University of Rochester in what, 2017?
Yeah, so it was the Rochester Institute of Technology, which is next door to the University of Rochester.
See, I told you, I probably got these facts wrong in these webinars and stuff. All right. You're college, you're 19 years old or whatever. Had you always wanted to be a trader?
I wouldn't say always wanted to be a trader, more like always just wanted to, make a lot of money, to just basically be rich. And up until that point, I had tried, you go on Instagram or YouTube. There's always endless streams of like, you can make money doing this, you can make money doing that. Yeah. And I tried a bunch of them, affiliates and like drop shipping and stuff like that without much success. And then, through that, just being like, how can I make money basically on my computer? I ended up finding Tim Sykes originally and got introduced to Tim, watched all his YouTube videos, learned his strategies. And through that process is when I finally started like, okay, I have $2,000 now. Like, the first time I did it, obviously I failed. So I took that $2,000, turned it to like zero. Yeah. And then I was like, all right, well, we just got overexcited.
Okay,
let's do this again. And then we went with that $2,000 and started growing it.
You're in college, right? You're in college, and you were going to study computer, or you did study computer science.
Yep.
Okay. Did you graduate?
I did.
Okay, so you got your degree. Why not just get your degree and get paid, like just make bank being a programmer, right? Why not do that?
That was kind of the idea of even studying that major. Yeah. So I was never incredibly interested in it. It was just obviously a very high-paying degree out there. So it was kind of along the lines of like just looking to make money. So the way my degree program worked, actually, there was a year-long internship. It was paid, so like essentially simulating the real world between years 3 and 4. So we kind of took a year off from school, and I worked full-time as a software engineer. And by the end of that, I was like, this is horrible. I can't do this anymore.
Because I know some of you watching this are, and I had a similar experience, but some of you watching this, you're kind of in that first part, and we all know where you are now, and that's cool. But I love talking about this where you were, because when you were 19, making $2 million, did it cross your mind? You knew you wanted to do it?
Yeah, knew I wanted to, but never, it was surreal just the whole time.
Yeah.
And really, one of the big motivating factors for me was seeing other traders out there who were making the money and like, oh wow, for example, at the time, like Jack Kellogg, he made like $100,000 in a year. And I was like, oh, that's like, that'd be fantastic. You graduate college as a software engineer, like that's a really good starting salary. And he did it just trading, like hanging out at his house. Like that sounds like the life. There's
a difference between you and I think it's the same difference that shows up in Tim Grattani. It's the same difference that showed up in Jack Kellogg. And I want to address this because I think that if anybody's watching this channel, it's probably they're still on the journey. They're probably in the middle of it. And I think there's a difference in the way that your mindset worked. And it was, you didn't know how you were going to do it, but you decided that you were going to do it.
Mm-hmm. That's a great way to put it.
And I think that's interesting because I think there are some people watching that don't know if they can do it. And are so lost in the sea of information out there. You search on YouTube and it's like how to do trading and there's a billion results. I think there's this attitude that you and Jack Kellogg and I want to say Tim Grattani, and I want to say the big ones, like I see this attitude that you have. It's everything that you do now. Every single, and we're going to come back around to this glitch and this stuff. If you decide you're going to do it, you know there's going to be obstacles along the way. but you're determined that whatever those obstacles are. So here's my question. That was the 25-minute lead up to my question. What were some of those obstacles? Because it wasn't just like $2,000 and ding, $2 million. Like, what were some of the obstacles? What went wrong along the way?
Yeah, for a long time, the most classic mistake that I had was I'd have a stretch of a couple good trades or a couple good weeks, and then you have that one big loss that kind of wipes everything out, because it was just stubbornness and kind of overconfidence too, where you get in that groove and you're doing a lot right, but then you just still lack that discipline that you need to be a great trader.
Were those trade sizing problems where you went in too big? Or were they problems where you go, nope, I could turn this loser into a winner. I've done this before.
Yeah, the second one there.
Yeah.
Basically, having to swallow the pill where you're like, you're wrong.
Yeah.
And then you try to tell the market, no, you're wrong.
Yeah.
And then that compounds into a huge loss for
Have you ever turned around, this is a bad question, but have you ever turned around a really bad trade into a winner?
Yeah, it's definitely happened, and then that fuels the fire.
That fuels the fire.
Yeah.
I've noticed, I don't know if you've ever been through this or if during your journey you went through this, where you're sitting on, let's just say it's $1,000 of profits for the week, something early on, and you have a loss that's like $500, and it went wrong, you didn't handle it correctly, it's Friday, and you can close it. Now you're going to drop that $1,000 week to a $500 week. That's where I had problems.
Oh yeah.
That's where I had problems, was I'm like, no, I had 1,000, now I only have 500, and sometimes it's like I had 1,000 and I'm losing 700 of it now, and there's just overwhelming stubbornness at closing. I just don't want to, and that has to change, right?
Has to. Yeah, even on a intraday basis. As my journey would go on, and at this point I was, a successful trader, not a millionaire yet, but successful, and you'd make maybe $1,000 or $2,000 in a day, and then you have a $500 loss, and you're like, I should just walk away. This is fine.
Yep.
But you're like, no, you want to end at a high.
Right.
So, and then all of a sudden you just bleed all that money away, and it's just stubbornness.
Yeah, I've often said a trader on their path to success will have this one experience where they wake up in the morning and there's pizza boxes everywhere, and there's Return of the Jedi playing on the TV, and everything's a mess, and you're like, what happened? And there's this giant losing trade, and you're like, it's almost like you go through that period of where you shut off and don't confront it. Was it an experience or two that forced you to sort of confront that?
Yeah, I'd say two things happened kind of at the same time. And it was right as I was starting to graduate college, so my final semester. First one, just life was coming. And at that point, I already had a job lined up, and I was like, that's not a bad, I kind of viewed it as a backup plan. If I have to do this, I'll do it. I can't just not have a job. But at that point, I was only making maybe $2,000 a month or so trading. Not I could move home and live with my parents or something, but not enough to sustain an adult life. So I was flirting with that idea, and I really need to figure this out and figure it out soon. Otherwise, I'm just gonna get stuck in that 9-to-5 cycle. There was that, and then also right before my final spring break of college, I'd finally grown my account up to a reasonable size, around $30,000. So I was above that pattern day trader rule. And the day before I flew down to Florida, I took the dumbest trade ever and lost $5,000 on that account. And at that point, it was you gotta get your shit together, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Because that trade, it was just dumb and a huge loss, a very meaningful part of the account. And ultimately, the spring break time away from the market allowed me to recover rather than compounding that error.
Yeah.
As well as gave me some perspective of I need to do this. Life's coming.
I just love that. So I think to summarize, there is this experience that some traders have where they go, I got to wake up to become the kind of trader I want to be.
Yeah.
And there was a psychologist who once said, when we become exhausted by the person that we used to be, that's when we finally make a change. It's kind of the version of rock bottom.
Right. Yeah.
And luckily that wasn't a massive, see, this is the interesting thing. For you, it wasn't losing your entire account that did it. It was stepping back big enough that you recognized that it could get out of control. Self-awareness is really rare. Okay, I'm going to ask you a question, and hopefully we've known each other long enough and you feel comfortable. Were there some times between 2,000 and 35,000 where you broke your risk management and got away with it? Were there times where you took a big trade? Did you have some big leaps in there, or were you methodically plodding along?
I think, trying to look back on it, I feel like any time that I broke those rules is when I got like slapped around.
Yeah, yeah.
There wasn't any like big leaps forward. There were the kind of the big steps back for a while too. But I was never rewarded in the big leaps. It was more like, you're being an idiot.
Yeah.
And then I took that loss and then, put all the pieces back together and kept growing. So it was kind of like when I was growing that account and we got in a good groove, good strategies, I was like taking like 5 steps forward and then I'd maybe take like 3 steps back. So I was still moving forward, but I was taking those 5 steps forward slowly and then would take the
And
the
this
hit.
this is all leading up to, because there was a methodology to this. There's a pattern that you were using at this time. And I want to get to that. But I think that there's this other thing that I wanted to bring up with you, which is some people think that it's mindset. Some people think that it's trading strategy. Some people think that it's being in the right time and place. Like I was lucky, like if you're lucky to... I think there's this element to it, and you may be one of the best examples of this, that when you find a strategy that works, you then become more disciplined. It's not that you become disciplined and then you find a strategy that works. I think it's weird. You found a strategy that worked, and then you recognize that making stupid decisions didn't make sense anymore. Mm-hmm. I think that's so fascinating that there's this chance that somebody watching, if you learn a strategy that works, all of the sudden, all the other stuff that doesn't work becomes less interesting to you.
I think it's because you lose for so long.
Yeah.
Like there was, it was slow and steady. I was never trading large size, but there was about a 2-year period I was just like losing, and it didn't really matter what I did. It just was losing money. And at the time, I was still taking college classes and stuff, so I was kind of juggling a couple things. And then you find the strategy that works, and like you said, everything kind of becomes less interesting because you're like, well, I was doing all this other stuff and it sucked.
Yeah.
And now there's this thing that works, so I'm just going to try to just do that. So it's the light at the end of the tunnel.
How long did it take you to go from $2,000 to, if you can remember, $2,000 to $10,000?
So right around 2018, I had like my second $2,000 account. I told you I pretty much lost the first one. And then it was like November, December timeframe of 2018, all the way up until the summer. So it would have been July timeframe, so about 6 months or so. Because then in September 2019, I remember I had probably about $14,000 or $15,000, and that's when I actually went to Tim Sykes' first trading conference that I ever went to. I went there, met all those traders, and then from there, like the gains.
So you're sitting in the audience there, and you're like.
I was like middle. So I ended up making decent friends with Jack and Kyle at the time, which they weren't very big traders. They were successful, but they were around like, I think Kyle was at like $75,000 in total profits. And for reference, he's at like 4 million right now. Like at the time I met him, he's only around 75,000. So we kind of like, we were all roughly the same age, and we sat next to each other and started talking. But we were just like middle of this like packed room. There was probably like 400 or 500 people there.
Yeah.
And sat there and just listened to all these big traders like Tim Grattani and all these other millionaires who've done it. And it was a surreal moment just to meet them in person. That like these people are real, because there's that moment too. You're like, I'm watching a YouTube video. They're online, and then you meet them in person, or you have a conversation with them, and you're like, whoa.
That's why I like to ask you questions like how long it took you to get from where to where or whatever, because I think it's like when you're sitting at home and you're trading alone, and you look at these stories, people don't realize that you are exactly the same as anybody else watching this video. You went through the same emotions. Yep. You went through the same mistakes. You just made different, at the fork in the road, you made a different decision. Yeah. You said, well, I could do this by myself, or I could go to the conference. You went to the conference. I could keep taking trades that are off plan with large trade size, or I could, and you just keep, at the fork in the road, you kept making what I would refer to as disciplined decisions. You did the right thing at the right time. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of obvious. Like, don't risk too much. Trade a consistent strategy. Associate with other millionaire traders, like get to know people who are successful. Those are all, in this day and age, you can do that stuff now.
Yeah.
So, like at the conclusion of this video here, the big question is, and I know that people watching are going to say, well, what did he do? Like, what's your pattern? So I don't know if we're allowed, I don't know what Bowen's going to say about any of this, but if we're allowed to, I want to come back and then I want to dive into this glitch, this pattern, this thing that you've been working on to share with others the answer to the big question, like, what's the strategy? How did you do it? All right, so check back with part 2. If the video's glitching and whatever else, that's Tim Bohen trying to log into YouTube and cut. No, I'm just kidding. Love you, Tim. So when we come back in part 2, I'm going to ask you the big question. How did you do it? What's the strategy you used? Is it just a copy of Tim Sykes, or did you assemble pieces from other strategies? And where would somebody go about like developing their own? If you don't mind, we'll come back and address
Absolutely.
it. Okay, we'll see you in the next one.